Welcome to Spirited Discussion, a Spirit Island podcast. On this episode, we will be covering OHG, The Big Kahuna, Kamigawa, Big Splashy Boy, Oceans, Hungry, Grasp!
Yeah!
Woo!
It's your boy Ocean.
All right. Also known as the best spirit in the base game, duh.
I think you might get some arguments about that given that Rampant Green exists, but you know, I'm with you. I like Ocean a lot.
Best spirit from a fun perspective.
Sure, there you go.
All right. So yes, we are going to be doing our first spirit review. We're going to try to cover as much as we can about this spirit today, and boy, do we both have a lot to say.
Yeah. Ocean. I think we talked a lot about Ocean's Hungry Grasp already in our base game review episode, and today we're just going to try and dive in and fill in all the gaps we left there and talk about, you know, the theme and the mechanics, a ton of different other interactions with Ocean in the game, and see what we can cover for you.
Yeah. So I want to start off with a little anecdote, Kalen.
All right.
Okay. So first time we ever play the game, me and my wife, who I'm going to call Red, just for now. The first time we play the game, right, we're looking through the spirits. A bunch of them look cool. We want to start with low complexity. Of course, I see shadows, and I'm like, yeah, this guy looks really cool. And she sees River, and she goes with River. And she's like, hey, grab me the cards for this. And so I'm looking through the box. I'm getting the cards. I hand her the cards, and she's looking through them. And she's like, this is all cool, but, like, what does drown mean? And I'm like, drown? So I'm looking through the rule book. I'm flipping, and I'm like, I don't see anything about drown. Let me Google this. So I'm Googling, and it comes up as like, oh yeah, if you're playing Ocean's Hungry Grasp. And I'm like, no, we're not playing that. No, where's the River drowning? What does that do? And so we're both very confused. And she's looking at the cards, and she looks at the back, and she's like, this is not the right spirit. And I'm like, oh. So that's my introduction to Ocean.
I find this really funny in large part because I've seen a Reddit post about exactly that happening. Presumably not from Yugatu.
No.
Because this was a while back. And just the person being like, yeah, it was weird, but like it worked pretty well. I didn't understand why I had all these coastal focused powers, but I started inland.
Yeah, it's funny because there's not really a lot of like overlapping theme, I guess, in the base game. They're both water spirits. Obviously, their river versus an ocean is different, but just kind of at a glance, if you don't know anything about the game, you look at them and you're like, yeah, it's the same thing, sure.
Yeah, I mean, like, coming from a more, you know, experienced perspective now at this point, like, I really do appreciate that there's some thematic distinction between ocean being more of this kind of moon spirit, where river is much more of this sun spirit. But yeah, they're still both primary water spirits, and it's a very easy mistake to make.
Yeah. So, just starting at a base level of theme, it's cool, right? As you mentioned in our base game review, the art is stunning, and it does evoke that very famous Japanese painting, which was
Great Wave off Kanagawa, not Kamigawa.
Yes, correct. Yeah, that's the one. But yeah, you see that, and you're instantly kind of reminded of something. I think it's maybe the only place in the game that's kind of like an illusion. Right?
Well, what just in terms of the face kind of appearing on the waves?
I just mean kind of being a visual reference point to a piece of art that already exists.
Oh.
I mean, I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember who did the art for Ocean. That's Joshua Wright. Yeah, Joshua Wright. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've never heard him make any comments on it, so I couldn't speculate too much. But it sure does evoke that painting.
But yeah, so the art of it's cool. And then also just kind of looking at its growths, it's like you see something that pushes presence, gathers presence, pushes and gathers. And you start to kind of see like, okay, this is an ocean. This is just an ocean.
Now, I will comment at this point on the theme. Ocean's Hungry Grasp is not actually the ocean around Spirit Island. Ocean's Hungry Grasp lives in the ocean around Spirit Island. But it itself is not the ocean. So, like, if a shipwreck occurs, it's not always going to be because Ocean's Hungry Grasp is there. It very well might happen if Ocean's Hungry Grasp is there. But from what I've seen in the lore, Ocean is not, like, encompassing all of the ocean.
That makes sense. It makes sense. And otherwise, the ocean would be a part of every game, wouldn't it?
Exactly, yeah. And I mean, the ocean is a part of every game in the sense of the invaders explore into coastal lands no matter what. But Ocean's Hungry Grasp itself is a more localized focus of spiritual energy, or however you want to describe the spirits, that exists in the waters around Spirit Island.
Okay, yeah, that all makes sense. Gotta say, love the name too. The fact that it's Ocean's Hungry Grasp immediately tells you you're going to be taking things. And in this case, things being humans.
Yes. So, shall we talk a little bit about some of the mechanics of the spirit?
Okay.
So, Ocean's Hungry Grasp is a 0-1 spirit. When I say that, I mean it has a growth option that reclaims and doesn't place presence. It has a growth option that places 2 presence, and it has a growth option that places 1 presence. It has fairly normal tracks. They have elements on them. It has 2 innates, Pound Ships to Splinters, which generates fear, and Ocean Breaks the Shore, which lets you drown buildings. And it has 2 special rules, which are, I think, the bread and butter of this spirit.
Oh, yeah.
Ocean in Play, and I want to read that one in its entirety, which is, you may add or move presence into oceans, but may not add or move presence into inland lands. On boards where you have 1 or more presence, oceans are treated as coastal wetlands for spirit powers and blight. You drown any invaders or Dahan moved to those oceans. And then its second special rule is drowning, which is destroy drowned pieces, placing drowned invaders on your spirit board. At any time, you may exchange X health of these invaders for 1 energy, where X is the number of players in the game.
And that's very important. Very, very important.
Absolutely, yeah. That's where your energy income is coming from, because Ocean starts with 0 energy per turn and 1 card play, and is probably not getting to that 1 energy spot very often.
Yeah, as a maximum, and you're almost never going to do this in my opinion, you can get 2 energy gain. Woo! Although your growths do also get you some energy depending on what you pick. But yeah, I as far as Ocean in Play, something that I want to stress, because it's something that I kind of goofed up on in the last game I played, is that you can place Blight in the ocean if you are playing with this spirit. It's one of those rules that's not quite always relevant, in my opinion, but in those games when you're playing really tough adversaries that spread a lot of blight around, sometimes 1 extra blight saving you from a cascade or an extra cascade just by putting it in the ocean can make a huge difference. And I feel like if you've played a spirit a lot and you're very familiar with its special rules, it's one of those like parts of a special rule that you can just completely forget exists. And I've done it, and don't do that.
Yeah, I love that Ocean suddenly makes a lot of boards have land 3 is kind of cut off from a lot of other lands. Usually it only touches 2 other lands, and I guess more depending on how your island is arranged. But land 3 tends to be this dangerous area in a lot of games where suddenly, if you get a blight there and it cascades once, all your adjacent lands might have blight, and suddenly a cascade there is going to be at least 3 blight going down. And having the ocean available as sort of a dumping ground to save you some of that blight if you're really having trouble with that land. I mean, ideally you play so you don't have trouble with that land, but it's going to happen.
Yeah, and especially because, in my experience, you end up with a lot of presence that are just kind of chilling in the ocean. If the game goes for a while, you don't really mind losing one of those. It's not that big a deal.
I will say that my speculation is some of that feeling is because you tend to play more 2-player games.
Yeah. That's fair.
Yeah. We'll talk more about player count later.
Yeah, that'll come up quite a bit. Of note is that this spirit is, according to the board, is a high offense, kind of medium control, medium fear, slightly under medium defense, and lower than that utility. And you definitely see the offense, even just in its innate, in the fact that its second innate, Ocean Breaks the Shore, is one that can actually deal with cities relatively easily.
Absolutely. My favorite ocean growth pattern leads to you drafting a card on turn 2, and if you happen to get lucky and draft something that has water and earth elements, you're drowning a city on turn 2.
Let's go into the growth then. What growth do you think you're doing most often with this spirit?
Not growth 2, unless it's a very large game. The pattern I tend to play leads to a lot of alternating between the first growth and the third growth. So, push presence out from the ocean, gain power cards, and then play a bunch of cards, and then reclaim, pull presence back into the oceans, gain a power card, get some energy to help you keep fueling it, and then just sort of alternating those because you've got about your hand size should hopefully be about twice the number of card plays you have available. So you're reclaiming every other turn.
That's completely fair. Yeah, I feel like the second growth is one of those new player traps. It's helpful, obviously, if you're playing in a large game with a lot of different boards, you need to be able to get to as many oceans as you can. And the fact that you can put a presence in any ocean twice, it's like you're going to need to do that if there's a lot of spirit boards. But if there's only one or two, you shouldn't really be doing it that often. It's always nice to take two presents off the board, like you always like to do it, but yeah, if you're not constantly gaining that extra power card in that third growth, you're going to be in like a reclaim loop problem.
Yeah, and the other problem that Ocean has is if you don't take that third growth, you're going to end up with all your presence in the ocean, and suddenly you're not going to be able to target half of your hand.
Yeah, that's a gigantic problem. You don't ever want to end up with all of your presence in the ocean. Big issue. So yeah, I would say definitely most often you're going to want to be doing that third growth, and then of course the first growth to reclaim when you need to.
Absolutely.
As far as presence tracks, we kind of hinted at it earlier, but this is not generally a top track spirit.
I actually played a game with Ocean recently. I wasn't playing Ocean. A friend of mine was, who's not as into the game. He's played a fair amount of Spirit Island, and we were playing, I think, England 4, and he actually almost emptied his top track while staying at 2 card plays.
Whoa.
And, I mean, his board was fine. It was astonishing in some ways. I think part of it is the other 3 of us in the game really knew what we were doing, but he actually did kind of the opposite of what we were just talking about. He took a lot of growth 2s, and he went for a lot of top track stuff, and it worked for him. And I don't think it was the best way to play the spirit, but I think that it certainly worked at that difficulty level.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. But in general, I would say I'm looking for those extra card plays, especially because if you're drowning correctly, you'll end up with a lot of energy in a smaller game. We gotta always put that clause. So you generally want to have more card plays. And especially because the top track isn't really for gaining energy. Now, I will say I do like that first moon and first water. I don't hate getting those, but generally my priority is more on the bottom track than anything else.
I think there is some space in larger spirit games where, we talked a little bit about drowning scales with the number of players. In larger games, there is some benefit potentially to trying to get that 1 energy income to just help you stay afloat. But It's still one of those things where, if you're going to a table with 6 people, I might just choose not to play Ocean rather than try and build some kind of janky top track build. Yeah. Which is unfortunate because I really like the spirit. But
yeah, and I mean, it does also depend if you are stuck in a weird game where you're not able to drown a lot of things for one reason or another. It can be nice to get that 1 energy. I just can't fathom going all the way to the 2, but the 1 energy can be nice if you are really struggling or, yeah. So we kind of talked about it, but the whole thing with many spirits playing with Ocean is the problem that X health of drowned invaders equals 1 energy, where X is the number of players, which means in a single game, where if you're just 1 spirit, an invader gets you 1 energy. 2-player game, a town gets you an energy. 3-player game, a city gets you an energy, and then above that, you're looking at drowning multiple things to get 1 energy. That's not a great economy.
Yeah, it gets tricky. I think Ocean is pretty strong up through about 4 players, and then at 5, it just the spirit starts falling apart, unfortunately.
Let's talk about the unique cards.
Yeah. So Ocean has 4 uniques, like most spirits, and there's
a theme.
Well, yeah, a lot of them target coastal lands, as you might expect for an Ocean spirit.
Yeah, so curiously, 3 of them target coastal, and 1 of them targets another player, which can effectively not be coastal, but might also still end up being coastal, depending on what happens.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so we have Call of the Deeps, which is 0 cost, gets you a moon, an air, and a water. It targets a coastal land, and remember, your oceans are coastal wetlands. You can gather 1 explorer, or if the target land is the ocean, you may gather 2 explorers.
Next card is Grasping Tide. Costs 1, gives you a moon and a water. It's a fast power, range 1, must target coastal, generates 2 fear, and defend 4.
The next one is 0 cost, slow power, swallow the land dwellers. Only gives you a water and a... it's earth, right?
Yeah, water and earth.
I want to call it mountain, but water and earth. At range of 0 in a coastal land, you drown an explorer, a town, and a Dahan, and that is not optional.
Yeah, if you're drowning them with swallow the land dwellers, you gotta accept the collateral damage sometimes. Last card is Tidal Boon. This is the one that targets another player. It is also slow, costs 1, gives moon, water, and earth. Target spirit gains 2 energy and may push 1 town and up to 2 Dahan from one of their lands. And then it has this weird secondary effect. If Dahan are pushed to your ocean, which I should note, your ocean means an ocean with your presence in it, not just an ocean on a board where you have presence. You need to actually have presence in the ocean for this second ability. But if Dahan are pushed to your ocean, you may move them to any coastal land instead of drowning them. So the Dahan get to go surfing, basically.
Yeah, it's a little weird. There's not a ton of effects in the game that let you just kind of move things like cross the whole island, but there's a few.
Yeah, this is, I think, Strong and Constant Currents can do it, and a minor power from Jagged Earth, I believe.
That one where you make the Dahan angelic and you teleport them and give defense.
The Paratrooper Dahan power in the major deck, Rapid Wings of Sunlight. And then, this entire Spirit Finder, but Finder's a weird spirit.
Yeah, Finder's going to stay lost to us for a little while.
Yeah.
But, so what do you think about the unique cards in general for Ocean?
Grasping Tide is really strong. 2 fear and defend 4 for 1 energy is, I think, undercosted, and I really appreciate that because the other cards... I like Tidal Boon, Swallow the Land Dwellers, and Call of the Deeps. I play too many games where Call of the Deeps doesn't actually stop builds, and instead is just like a poor source of energy income. And Swallow the Land Dwellers... I don't like that it hits Dahan. I like that it has water and earth elements so I can trigger my innate, but yeah.
Grasping Tide, I feel like you might end up even playing it just for fear. Like,
sometimes
if you have enough card plays and you know you're going to reclaim anyway, it's like, sure, 2 fear for 1 energy when you're flush with energy. Sure, why not?
And Ocean is very hungry for those water elements, too. So the idea of playing Grasping Tide, even when there's not, like, a Coastal Ravage that you can deal with it, is still a good card to play sometimes.
Yeah. And it's also worth noting, you want to stress to anyone you're playing with that, like, if there's lands to be taken care of and they're coastal, let me do it, please.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as Call of the Deeps, it can be nice to gather 2 explorers and that could potentially prevent the build. Or another use I found for this is just slowly moving things towards the coast. You know, there's not a ton of ways. There's really only one way, actually, at base with these uniques and the innate powers for Ocean to really do anything to something that's not coastal. And other than the Tidal Boon, a Call is the only other way to, like, pull in something. Now, granted, pulling an Explorer into your coastal land from an adjacent land is not the most helpful, but for 0 cost, it can help you out.
I definitely like it as a way to, on maybe turn 1 or 2, try and deny a build somewhere. This is going to be adversary specific to some extent, because a lot of adversaries try and cheat around you denying their builds. But Call of the Deeps can definitely do some work in that regard.
And it can also get you a little bit of that energy early on when you need it pretty badly.
Yeah.
Swallow the Land Dwellers. I think if Ocean didn't have the innate ability to drown towns and cities, I feel like Swallow the Land Dwellers would be a little higher. But oftentimes it kind of feels redundant, in my opinion.
As much as I was down on it earlier, it is basically destroy an explorer, a town, for 0. That's pretty cool.
It is, as long as you have the town to destroy.
Which, if depending again on which adversary you're playing, you hopefully do.
Certainly, but maybe not always.
Maybe not always.
But yeah, of course, anything that can deal with a town for 0 is not the worst. And then yet, I don't know how you feel. Tidal Boon is just, it's kind of awkward. I mean, giving another spirit 2 energy, even if that was the only effect, is not bad. I'm not saying it's a bad card, but it just oftentimes it doesn't. I don't know. It's mostly a way to try to get towns from more inland over to your coasts. That's generally how I try to use it. The Dahan move feature is like unique and interesting, but I find it to be kind of fiddly.
Yeah, I've found Title Boon. So speaking strictly about 2+ player games, so you can't target yourself with Title Boon.
Right.
Title Boon is strongest when you have some players who can really, really coordinate with each other and make sure that they're taking growth options such that your teammates have presence in lands that are going to have towns that you want to get rid of.
It is worth reminding that other players can push towns into the ocean, but of course for them to do that, they have to be on the coast.
But even pushing a town from an inland land to a coastal land where I can then drown it is really helpful for me as the ocean player.
Certainly. I don't know. I just find it awkward. The thing is it's you're almost like embarrassed for riches with ocean, but only on the coastal lands. So it really depends on what's going on the board. A lot of times it's just like I just don't need another town to be there, or I don't know, or the towns are too far inland to really be that much of a use to me. It's not. Again, I wouldn't say it's a bad power, but I find it to be fiddlier than the other powers.
Yeah, and this is, I think, a little bit what gets Ocean to be high complexity, is a lot of what Ocean relies on happening in the game is your teammates to play in a particular way that is different than their spirit wants to by default.
Yeah.
And that tension can make Ocean really unfun if it's on a team when you don't have a good level of coordination. And
yeah.
just Tidal Boon, I think, exemplifies that to some extent, where if I'm playing, Lightning Swift Strike with Ocean, I love to have Tidal Boon available, but it means that Lightning is going to have to grow somewhere where they maybe didn't want to go. And that's going to throw off potentially their entire game to some extent. Which hopefully the 2 energy and solving a land by pushing a town out of it is enough. But sometimes it's not. And that can be it can make things less fun for the other player sometimes.
Yeah, I'd say that's completely fair. In a 2-player game, you really do have to stress that, like, look, if you're going to place presence somewhere, please place it like further away from the coast to deal with those areas that Ocean can't. So actually, so next up, we were going to talk about strengths and weaknesses, and I think we've kind of hit it a little bit, that one of the biggest strengths, the biggest strength with Ocean is just that no matter what it is, if it's on a coast, you can deal with it, as long as you have the right elements or are playing the right cards. Just with its unique cards and its innates, you're able to get rid of 2 cities at once in one land, which is bonkers.
Yeah, Ocean has such a strong ability to be offensive on the coasts. And usually Ocean can cover a fair amount of coastal lands, but if you're playing a 2-player game, there's only 6 coastal lands. And that means that there's 10 non-coastal lands that your teammate is going to have to be prioritizing. Again, we talked about Tidal Boon, you can do a little bit to help them with that. But for the most part, that's leaving the other spirit or spirits on their own. Now, in a 3-player game, there's 9 coastal lands. And suddenly, it gets a little bit more like Ocean has its own board of the 9 coastal lands. But I've found in my experience that in 3-player games, I can't actually solve all of the coastal lands as Ocean. There's usually just too many overlapping terrain types, or something weird happens where, I can solve 2 lands this turn, but there are 3 lands that need solving. And so as much as I love, feeling powerful on the coasts, I feel like I'm often asking for more help than I really want to be sometimes with Ocean there. And that gets kind of into the weaknesses for me.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, again, it's weird that looking at everything that you're kitted out with, it's just like you really have a very minimal influence over anything other than the coasts. And as such, it can make playing single player, true single, one spirit, it can make it a little bit of a game of luck sometimes. If you're playing on harder difficulties, if there are just... And part of it depends on the boards as well. We didn't really talk about this, but you kind of want boards that have varied coasts. You don't want to get hit with oh, good, 3 of the mountain lands are ravaging the coasts at once, and then, the next ravage, great, there's nothing on the coast for me to defend or do, or you know what I mean? Like, Ocean can struggle with just kind of some of the variants of the game.
Yeah. Something you mentioned there that I really like is to think about Ocean in solo against a high level adversary. If I'm playing, if I'm trying to teach someone how to beat England 6, and I want to give them as much of a cheat mode as I can, one of the things I tell them to do is try Ocean into England 6, with the caveat that you need to absolutely, absolutely make sure that all of their escalation builds happen on the coast. And just let the inlands blight, let the inlands go as much as you need to, and you will figure it out eventually. You will get so much energy that you're swimming in it, and you're going to be able to draft a major to either help rush the fear deck or else handle some of those inland lands at some point. But that is just one of those where, England 6 to me doesn't feel like it has many cheat codes, but Solo Ocean is one of them.
Yeah. Yeah, oddly, Ocean is one of those spirits that could actually be helped by, like, a lower level adversary, simply because a lot of them place, like, extra towns, and having one more town to drown and get that energy from earlier can help you escalate yourself pretty nicely.
Yeah, I've talked some about speedrunning before in this game, and Ocean is one of the few spirits where you can go faster and you can be more destructive against, say, a Brandenburg Prussia 1. Than you can against just a base game difficulty.
Yeah. And we talked about it too, but another weakness of Ocean is just that, and I've never personally played this, but if you're playing with 6 people or 5 people or just a lot of people, it just makes that energy gain, like, sad.
Yeah, I've seen some people suggest, like, house rules to cap it at maybe 4 invader health per energy or things like that. And I don't know that I don't know that I really like that. I feel like I'd rather. I don't know. I wish there was some other way to
play that spirit. I mean,
yeah. I mean, and yet I've played Ocean in a 6-player game before, and I had fun with it. Now that was we haven't mentioned it yet, but Ocean has an aspect called Deeps that changes up some of its gameplay, and that was with the Deeps aspect, and I actually really enjoyed that game, but. That's getting a little away from what's normal for Ocean.
Right. Also worth noting that the base game only came with enough boards to play 4-player, so...
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe the initial plan was not to make 6 players be a thing. I don't know. But certainly I don't know if people would... I think people would accept if there was an aspect that came in that was the kind of the purpose of the aspect was to rebalance the amount of energy gained for higher player counts.
Yeah.
But okay, so we are going to move on to a new segment called Gift Guide.
Oh, you got me a gift?
No, not for you, you fool. It's for the spirits.
Oh, darn it.
Yes. So one of the perks of playing Spirit Island is you get to play with other people. You get to play co-op. And there are a lot of cards in this game, boons, gifts, or otherwise, that give something to a spirit. So if you are playing with Ocean's Hungry Grasp, what is something that you would want someone else to give to you?
The biggest one for me is absolutely plus range. And the reason for that is it simplifies the game for Ocean significantly if you even have +1 to your range, because so much of your stuff targets at range 0. And suddenly you're like, oh, I wanted to use Call of the Deeps in the ocean, but I don't have any presence in that ocean right now. But I have one on a coastal land. Now I can use it in the ocean. Or I need to drown stuff in 2 different lands, and I only have enough presence to push into one of them. How do I get it in there? Okay, well, I got +1 range. I can drown in both now.
So from the minor power deck, we have Reaching Grasp, something we recently talked about.
Yes.
This is the situation, right? We dumped on it a little bit, but this is the situation that you would love to pull it if you're playing with an Ocean. And boom, here you go. Here's +2 range. Now, it's important to note, this +2 range will not help any of Ocean's innate powers. All of its stuff targets coasts. So this is good for other cards that Ocean might be drafting.
Yeah. Which I've had a game where recently where I was playing Ocean and I had Carapace Land, which is a range 0 defend power, and I got a plus range and I was able to defend a land 8 with Ocean's 0 range power, and that was really helpful.
Wow. Yeah, that's wild. Also from the minor deck is Scream Disease into the Wind, which lets a spirit gets +1 range with all their powers, and then also they get to put down a disease, which is helpful if you're the Ocean and you want to disease up some things that are non-coastal to try to prevent them from getting crazy.
Absolutely. If you want to keep so going back to England again, because I apparently love England as an adversary, if you want to keep that capital on the coastal lands, getting disease somewhere on the inlands is just huge for that.
Mm-hmm. For sure. From the major deck, we have Flow Like Water, Reach Like Air, which gives target spirit +2 range with all powers. They may push one of their presence to an adjacent land, bringing up to 2 explorers, 2 towns, and 2 Dahan along with it. Or if you have 2 air and 2 water, you can also bring 2 cities and up to 2 blight. That's pretty cool, because you could use that to drown a bunch of things, or at the very least, you could just use it to have better reach.
Yeah, and sometimes you can do both.
Mm-hmm. So the last one for the major deck I wanted to mention is Entwined Power, which is technically not a reach, but it does get you more places, technically. You can use another player's presence to target powers. And then you also get a power card, and you can share a power card.
Yep. I think Entwined Power is actually a really interesting one to end on with that, because I know there's some unique powers, but Entwined Power also has this advantage of it gets Ocean more powers, which I think is actually not the most useful for Ocean. I feel like Ocean tends to want to take its first and third growth so often, and both of them get power cards, that Ocean is regularly swimming in powers, at least the way that I play them.
Well, potentially you could use this to help you out, and then just use the second growth. Grow a bunch.
Yeah.
But yeah.
If you empty that bottom track, get a few powers gifted to you, and suddenly just go into a reclaim loop spamming 5 miners or something like that.
Mm-hmm. So lastly, I have a few cards that are unique to spirits. So from Darkness Down Your Spine, we have Reach from the Infinite Darkness. So that spirit can abduct your presence, and then on that turn that it plays that card, for each of your presence that it has in its dark, you get +1 range with all your powers. It's worth noting that if somehow your presence can stay in the dark, and then they play this card again on a reclaim, you get that extra +1 still, even if they didn't abduct a presence this turn. So that could be pretty nice. It could be a fun combo.
Yeah.
We also have Gift of the Sunlit Air, which is target spirit gets +1 range with all their powers. If you target another spirit, gain 1 energy, and that's from Sunbright Whirlwind.
Yep, Sunbright Whirlwind, which is a really good Ocean partner. Partially because of that card, and also because Sunbright Whirlwind has a bunch of things that say, hey, push things around, like 2 towns, into whatever land, like the Ocean.
Fair. And then lastly, we have Exaltation of Molten Stone, which is split 1 energy per fire you have between yourself and another spirit as evenly as possible. Target spirit gains +1 range with their powers that originate from a mountain. So you do have to be on a mountain, which is not always the most fair. And that card is from
Volcano Looming High.
Yes. So it's definitely more of an edge case, but hey, could still help.
Absolutely. There's if you're dealing with 9 coastal lands, you probably have at least a couple mountains in there.
Mm-hmm. So there you go. This holiday season, if Ocean is on your buying guide, please consider these powers. So you want to talk about just other generic cards that if you are playing as Ocean, you want to be drafting.
Yeah, there's I mean, the first thing I want is 0 cost powers, because 0 cost powers from the minor deck, just to be able to, even if I can't get good drowning income, have something I can play and do something to interact with the board still.
Okay.
The second thing is cards that have water and earth elements, just because it's so important for Ocean's right innate when you want to be drowning towns and eventually cities.
Fair.
And I think there are probably a lot of more specific cards that are really handy and really interesting on Ocean, but I think I should pass to you and ask you first if there's some things generally that you like to see.
Well, so I do just want to note that there are 6 cards in the minor and major power deck that have a range of 3. I just thought that that's worth mentioning. And there's 35 minor and majors with a range of 2. although a lot of those have various restrictions that might be a problem to Ocean. So Ocean, as we mentioned, wants reach, and there is a limited amount of cards that can get that extra reach. So, and if you see any of those cards that have a big boy reach on them, as long as they're relevant to your situation and you can play them, you probably do want to get those. As for more specific cards, of course, there is one major power that allows you to cheat on Ocean's rules, and that is Indomitable Claim. Add 1 presence to target land, even if you normally could not due to land type. Defend 20. So, as far as I know, everything else in the game, you're stuck, man. You can't get off those coasts if you're playing base Ocean. But Indomitable Claim, yeah, that lets you cheat. You can get off the Ocean. I don't know. I've never used this in a game of Ocean, but I mean, I'm sure it would be really cool.
It's fun. It does still have the same kind of problem that some of the range boosts do, which is that your unique cards and your innate tend to target coastal lands still.
Yep.
So even if you suddenly can get inland, you can't, swallow the land dwellers on an inland land.
Mm-hmm. Another card of note is Flocking Red Talons. So this is one of those major powers that does actually have a range of 3, and it comes from a wetland, which, as you might remember, your Ocean counts as a wetland. So it's kind of like pretty perfect for Ocean, but it lets you move some beasts around, and then for each beast present, you can choose a different invader, 1 damage to each of those invader, and then you get to push explorers and towns, 1 of them per beast. So you're able to just kind of bring things closer to the Ocean, do a little bit of damage on lands far away from the coasts, plus it gets you water as well as an air, which is nice.
Yeah. We haven't talked too much about the air elements on Ocean. Ocean only has 1 air element on its unique cards, but its left innate, Pound Ships to Splinters, which generates fear for you, only can trigger if you have air elements. And so drafting things that have water and air can be really, really nice on Ocean, just because suddenly you start rushing that fear deck a lot more.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, the left innate's awesome. It's just free fear, basically. Especially because it's range of 0, but like anywhere. So even if you are stuck completely in the Ocean, you can still do that.
Yep.
One more card I did want to mention, and it's mostly just for flavor reasons. Cast Down into the Briny Deep. It costs a lot of energy, but as Ocean late in the game, you're able to do it. And yeah, you could possibly hit that boost on it and just sink a board.
Yeah, Ocean has almost all the right elements to threshold Cast Down into the Briny Deep. Just in its base kit. I think the only thing it's technically missing is a sun, if you were to go top track for some reason and get some of those elements.
Yeah.
But yeah, Ocean loves sinking the island. I think the only thing I dislike about Ocean sinking the island is that you don't get to drown the invaders on the destroyed board. I think you definitely should, but that would clearly be too much rules text to fit onto 1 major power for interacting with 1 spirit.
Fair. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's a pretty powerful... I mean, Cast is a pretty powerful major, and it's just fun. It's fun to use on Ocean where it feels thematically correct to do so. And of course, even if you can't sink the board, 6 fear, destroy all invaders, range of 1 from a sacred zone, but it has to be coast. It can be all right. It might be redundant, but yeah.
Yeah, unthresholded Cast Down. We'll probably talk about that if we keep doing the minor and major bingo.
Yeah.
Unthresholded Cast Down is just not my favorite power. It does a lot of stuff, but for 9 energy, it's just really not enough.
Yeah, no, that's completely fair. Honestly, as I was reading it, I'm like, no, wait, yeah, this is... You don't really want that if you're Ocean.
Well, because you'd rather just drown everything.
Yeah. So if you can hit the threshold, for sure, this is an interesting card for Ocean. Otherwise, eh. But yeah, that's just some cards that I think are fun for Ocean. But obviously, anything that can really kind of reach further inward and either pull things towards you or just kill them is going to be good for you.
Yep. So, do you want to talk about some adversaries or scenarios?
Yeah, I'm going to defer this a little more to you because I'm sure you've played with more variety of adversaries than I have.
Okay. I think that I've mentioned England a few times, and I've probably said most of what needs to be said about England. Ocean is, in my mind, one of the better counters to England, at least if you're in a small enough game that Ocean is, running as a good spirit. And for some of the other adversaries, Brandenburg Prussia, I think it can do a lot. partially because it has that Call of the Deeps that can drag explorers from multiple coastal lands to help clean up late game if there's, a resurgence coming on with those stage 3 cards. But also, Ocean just does well, I think, into Sweden, honestly, which is a little weird. But that's mostly... In solo, it's a little trickier. But in multiplayer, if you have a teammate who is not going to utterly be destroyed by Sweden, Ocean's ability to just take out all of the buildings on the coast and honestly throw enough defend with Grasping Tide that you can actually deal with, a city ravaging for 5 damage. You can defend it for 4. I think Ocean is actually pretty good into all of the adversaries in the base game box.
Fair. That's fair.
When you get to some of the other adversaries, France, not so much. You're going to start having trouble with those towns building and that town limit and your inability to interact with inland lands.
A bit of rules noting I will mention on France is that no, your drowned towns, they don't get taken away. They go back to the main pool. You can exchange them for explorers or just energy if you want.
Yeah, but even so, just if France starts getting enough explorers inland, which at higher levels it's going to, you're just going to have problems with that.
Oh, 100%. I wasn't debating you. I was just just wanted to make sure, because
yes.
You look at that and you're like, oh, you only have a limited number of towns, but they just do it like that to just track the towns. This is not about like specifically where each town is. Yeah.
Yes, it's about towns on the island, not towns or invader pieces on the spirit boards themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, we get to the Jagged Earth adversaries, and Ocean cries in a corner because Habsburg Livestock Colony feels almost like it was made to punch Ocean in the gut. Oh. And just with the lost condition, you can just lose the game out of control on the inland lands if you don't have a teammate who can help you with them very, very early on. And on the coastal land, and because of the way that Durable works, towns no longer get drowned when they go into your ocean unless it has Blight in it.
Ugh.
And so they get 2 damage instead and then get cleaned up back to a coastal land, which if there's a coastal land with Blight, they get destroyed, but then they're destroyed and not drowned. And so you don't get the energy for them either. And so Habsburg Livestock Colony is just not a fun time with Ocean, at least in my experience. If anyone has had success in that matchup or has had more fun with it with Ocean, yeah, I'd love to hear about it. And then I haven't actually played Ocean into Russia or HME.
I actually have a little HME experience.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, so Habsburg Mining Expedition is one that me and my wife have played a little bit, where I was Ocean. Now, she was Vengeance is a Burning Plague, which is a very helpful spirit, getting all of those disease out there, which can help either prevent a build or prevent a ravage, thanks to the rules of Habsburg. That's very nice. But yeah, Ocean, as you go up a little bit, where more and more lands are just kind of getting ravaged just all over the map, Ocean feels less helpful. Because of the extra ravages, because Ocean clears out the coast, you're generally not doing those extra ravages on those lands, on the coast, which is where you'd want to be able to prevent them. So, yeah, I would not recommend Ocean. I've had some success at the lower levels of it, but once you start going up, it's hard.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Ocean is just a very feast or famine spirit. I find you're either going to have a lot of fun with it, and it's going to be just very useful, and you're going to feel powerful, like you're crushing cities and towns left and right, and just completely preventing all sorts of bad things. Or you're in an adversary or in a amount of players or a weird terrain type that you just find yourself struggling to do things. You can kind of fall into that trap a lot with Ocean. For instance, if you have all of your presence on the coast, right? If you have none in the actual ocean, you can't use your unique power card that lets you drag explorers into the ocean. You can still use the card, but you can't use it to drown because you're not in the ocean to gather them. So it's just one of those spirits that you just either it's working for you and you feel great and it's powerful, or you just kind of find yourself woefully unprepared for whatever the game's throwing at you.
I will say that on the feast side of Ocean, I can't tell you how many times I've tried to teach this game to someone, and they ask me if they can push towns into the ocean with a push effect. I give them river or something like that, and they're like, "Oh, can I just push the town off the island? It's like, no. There is a spirit that lets you do it. It's not relevant. We're not playing with it right now because we want you to learn the base game without Oceans in play warping the rules. But Ocean is one of those spirits where I think Oceans in play is not really a support power explicitly, but is one of the most powerful support effects in the game for just being able to turn control powers into destroy powers.
Yeah, that's fair. Do you have a spirit that you'd like to combo with Ocean? If you're playing a two-spirit solo game or you're just playing with someone else, is there like a fun combo?
My goodness, there's so many of them. I think the funniest one from just the base game box is probably Ocean plus Bringer.
Okay.
Because Bringer doesn't actually get to destroy things; it gets to push them. But wait a minute, what happens if I destroy a town on the coast and push it into the ocean? Then I suddenly get 3 fear for that town, which is, kind of like what you'd get with the violence aspect on Bringer, but that's a little beyond the scope here. But you get extra fear, you get to give it to Ocean, and it's just really fun to play this Bringer Ocean game where Bringer is trying to deal damage in the inlands to push everything out to the coasts, and Ocean is just drowning everything it can get its hands on.
I like Lure of the Deep Wilderness just because it's the exact opposite of the ocean. It can only do things on non-coastal lands. And so if you're playing with those two together, I'm not going to say it's super, super powerful. It's not as synergistic as you'd kind of hope. But if you're playing a single-player, two-spirit game, it can be fun to play both of those because you get the fun of Ocean, but you also kind of negate the weakness. Because you're playing as both, you kind of cover each other's areas. Yeah, I like doing that.
I'm a little down on the Lure Ocean combo, mostly because I feel like it introduces a tension that I don't like, which is Lure wants to pull things inland. It wants to downgrade towns to double explorers and then pull them further inland, whereas Ocean very much wants to pull things more coastal to try and get them into areas where it can drown them or get them into the ocean itself to drown them.
True.
And so that tension, I don't enjoy that tension. Not to say that you shouldn't play the combo, but just it's not one that I personally like.
I guess what I'm saying, well, yeah, I can't say that I've necessarily played this with another human, but by myself playing both of these, I feel like it becomes a lot more of a fun puzzle. I could see how with another human, you'd basically be dictating, okay, I deal with this and you deal with this, and we're basically playing solo games or whatever.
Yeah, multiplayer solitaire.
Yeah. So I'll put the asterisk on that as a one-player experience, I find that at the very least, it's nice that kind of like you can enjoy Ocean without having to worry that its shortcomings might make you fail the game.
So, anything you want to say about blight cards here, or events and fears? Fear cards?
They're just like anti-synergy with the ocean. And that's a beginner trap, too.
This is one of those where I feel like it's actually a big theme win for the game. Is the events in the event deck and the fear deck represent humans on the island and animals on the island doing things themselves, where you get some influence over what they do. Like if it says, oh, push Dahan from, land X to land Y, or a land with some characteristics to some other land, you get to choose where they go. But humans don't voluntarily get up and move their towns into the ocean and drown. And so the idea that a fear card would not actually allow you to drown things makes some sense to me. And the only thing, and the contrast then is something like Call of the Deeps is a power where explicitly the spirit is affecting humans' brains in some way to sort of, put that siren song and drag them into the ocean.
I mean, that's fair. And from a balance perspective, if every time a fear card or an event or a blight card said to push something, you were able to just drown it, it would make the game too easy. But still, it's like you see those things and you think, oh, cool, I can put... Oh, no, it won't drown it. Like, the special rule specifically states it has to be your powers or another spirit's powers in order for the drowning thing to take effect.
Yeah, I believe there's been some back and forth on whether other spirits' special rules can interact with it.
Ooh.
Different printings have... So, for example, Sunbright Whirlwind we talked about, when it grows into a land, you can push an explorer from that land. Depending on which printing of Ocean you have, it may or may not allow for Sunbright Whirlwind to drown that explorer.
Oh gosh.
And I believe the digital version, the official Handelabra app, has it set right now that Sunbright Whirlwind cannot, with its special rule, drown explorers.
Huh.
But it can with its powers. And so that's kind of a really weird edge case that comes up sometimes, and I feel like turns into, why is the app bugged all the time? And so it's one of those that's in the FAQ.
Well, I feel like that's ultimately this is why Ocean was put into the high complexity in the base game. I don't think that like the actual technique of playing the Ocean is really that hard. I wouldn't consider it a low complexity, but I'd consider it more of a medium complexity. But if you're a newer player, you don't want to be playing a Spirit where you have to look up like, wait, does this push effect do it? Does this push effect do it? How does this like? I feel like it's more just a weird edge case overload with this Spirit than anything else. I think there's traps for sure that new players can fall into with it, but I don't think it's really that complex, especially not when you put it with some of the high or very high complexity spirits later introduced.
If I remember correctly, someone decided to make a tier list of what spirits have the most FAQ entries about them on the official FAQ, and Ocean needed its own tier above everything else.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes you got to kind of just say, we're just going to have fun with this and go with what makes the most sense. But yeah, no, looking at the FAQ, it's just like, yeah, there's just a lot of weird edge cases. And that's not a great experience as a newer player. I had to actually recently look up to just double check about event cards, because I know that fear cards and blight cards don't affect it, but like, hey, events were introduced after the Spirit. Like, let me just make sure. Sometimes there are things in this game that you look up and you're like, oh, okay, well, they decided to make that synergistic, even if it's not printed there in this specific printing.
Exactly.
Yeah, but by and large, I don't know. There's nothing in the Fear deck or the Blight cards or anything like that sticks out as like super good for Ocean. I can say that I just end up with, I feel like because you can only put your presence in a few places, I end up with just a lot of extra presence lying around. So Blight cards that make you remove presence, or just destroy presence, I should say, don't feel like that big a problem for Ocean.
Yeah, Ocean starts with 2 presence. If you take your middle growth on turn 1, you're going to be at 4 presence, and if you're gaining a presence every other turn because of a reclaim and growth 3 loop, yeah, you're gonna get plenty of presence out on the island. If you get that downward spiral or whatever else that destroys a presence every turn, Ocean's not going to be harmed by it to the extent that some other spirits would be.
It's also really not a Sacred Zone based spirit. It doesn't have any natural effects that care about that.
No, not built in. I do find that I often like drafting powers that use sacred sites with Ocean. And so I often have to figure out, oh, how am I going to actually build this sacred site? And am I going to have to like figure out which cards I play this turn and next turn based off of whether I have any sacred sites on the island?
Yeah. A lot of the higher range powers do require you to have a Sacred Zone. So that there's definitely reason for it, but in general, having a ton of presence in the Ocean itself does not really help you. So, yeah. So that's all I got for that.
I think the last thing that we've touched on a little bit, but haven't really gone into much detail on, is Ocean's Deeps aspect, which I don't think we're going to actually go into much here. Deeps is a really cool aspect. It was introduced in Nature Incarnate, and it's a lot of fun. If you have Nature Incarnate, or you are waiting for it to ship to you, cough cough, you can proxy it briefly, cough cough. Anyway, Deeps is a very fun aspect. I would recommend trying it. I think it does some interesting things to change Ocean's gameplay, but I think it does so many interesting things to change Ocean's gameplay that I'd almost like us to have our own episode, another episode on it specifically.
That's fair. We might very well do an episode where we cover 2 aspects, two big important aspects, like half and half. But yeah, so as far as Ocean's Hungry Grasp overall, what are your generalized feelings as we wrap this up?
I feel like I've been criticizing it a lot more than I should, given how much I like the spirit and how much I like playing as it. But I think that part of that is just I like playing it in multi-handed games a lot, where I have total control over all of the cooperation between the spirits, and it really shines in those games. When I'm playing with other people, I often do pass it over, just because, oh, this is going to warp the game for the new player, or, oh, this is going to do something where it just isn't going to be able to I'm going to have to explain and quarterback more because of it being in the game. And I don't like that about it. But it's still one of my favorite spirits. In the base game box, definitely very high up there. I don't know if it's my favorite in the base game box. I think River still has that distinction. But
Okay.
part of why I like River is I can play it with Ocean.
Yeah, I very much like Ocean. Again, I've talked a lot about the shortcomings, but in general, the shortcomings are just kind of a puzzle to be overcome. Especially if you're playing it 2-player like I usually do. It's not... I feel like that's the sweet spot in terms of you get a decent amount of energy still, you have someone else to help you with the inland lands, but because there's only 2 boards, there's not like a million inland lands. Yeah, so I in general, I do like Ocean. I feel like I kind of wish there was maybe like one more little thing, one more something, rule or power that could help it just a little bit with those inland lands. Like, not too powerful, but just something it could do to just like delay some problems out there or something. But I guess ultimately, mainly what it does is it lets you draft cards on 2 of its 3 growths. So yeah, so it's just like a fun puzzle to solve in that way, and I like it. I like the theme, and just come on, you're just destroying towns and cities and left and right. What's not to love? So Ocean can give me a hungry hug, I guess. I don't know.
I don't think you want to be hugged by this spirit. I don't know if someone's probably made a tier list about how huggable or cuddly the spirits are. I'm guessing Ocean's Hungry Grasp is not very high on that spirit, or on that list.
That's pretty fair. And I guess just going back to my point about wishing it could do something, I will say, we're not going to talk about it too much, but the Deeps does do that a little bit. It does a little something for you, giving you a little more range on things. So yeah, that's about all I got to say.
Well, thank you guys for listening, and if you want to give us feedback on this episode, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach us on Reddit, you can reach us on Discord, you could theoretically even email us or find us on Substack, but it's probably going to be best to reply on Reddit or Discord for now.
Yep, or YouTube.
Or YouTube
comments. Yeah. Yep. So we've had feedback from our first episode already, and we're very happy to see what you guys have said. Thank you so much for the positive feelings and vibes, and we hope that we won't let you down.
Thanks again.
Bye.